Good evening. Daf Yomi for the week is sponsored by Trevor and Melanie Reef in honor of the Rav and Kahal Yereim Kehila. And Daf Yomi is sponsored for the week by Yehuda Greenwood and Jeff Wald. B'zuchus Refuah Shlema for their dear friend Jeff Dabrowski, Yaakov and Miriam. Shev Refuah Shlema. And we are in a brand new parak. So this is it. Brand new parak. This parak continues on the conversation. The restrictions in our interactions with non-Jews, right? Is sort of the similar pattern that we had with the first parak. Here's the days we can't do business with them, the things we can't buy. We continue on that. Sorry. Still working on it. Ein ma'abinin behema bepundikos shel ovdei kocham. This we already quoted in the first parak. We had quoted this mission, it'll sound familiar, that you're not allowed to have your animals spend the, I put in the kennels, because the kennels for dogs, right? But for a stable for animals can't be taken care of by a non-Jew, right? Because mipnei, Mishnah says, cause shechashudin al haravia, we are worried that they have relations with their animals, which is appropriate this week's parsha, right? Bilam and the donkey. So there you are. So before you, that is correct. And so Bilam and his donkey. So therefore, it is not so far-fetched. So velotis yachid isha imahen mipnei shechashudin al harayos. It's also important for ladies not to be by themselves with the non-Jews as well, because they are also what do you call it? They're also they're involved in inappropriate relationships there too, and so that's going to be problematic. Now we know that also Jewish men can't be alone with Jewish ladies as a problem, but this is specifically for non-Jews. I don't need to remember why. I cannot remember why we specifically pick on the non-Jews here, because it's also for a Jewish man to be alone with a non-Jewish lady, with a Jewish lady as well. But v'lo yisyachid adam imahen, also a man can't be alone with a non-Jewish man. Why? Because we're concerned for murder, right? They might kill you if you are by yourself with them. So you have to be careful. They don't have the same moral standards in their circles. So you have to be worried about standing with them. Chaf beis amud beis. It was indeed. Ura minhi, we have a contradiction between this Mishnah and a Tosefta. Lokhin, this Mishnah, the Tosefta says, Lokhin mehen behema lekorban. You're allowed to buy an animal for sacrifice use. Vein choshishin, and we're not concerned. Lo mishum roveya, v'lo mishum nirva. We're not concerned that it had relations with somebody. A Tosefta are the brisos that were not included in the Mishnah, and they are also have the same level of authority as Mishnayos, but they're not in the Mishnayos, right? So therefore, when we see a contradiction between Tosefta and Mishnah, it should bother us. And we try to resolve and figure out exactly what's going on. One person's opinion versus another's opinion, or maybe each one is different, dealing with a different case. Those are the methods that we would try to resolve. So let's see what we do here. So this one, right, we've got, first our Mishnah says that we're worried that if we leave our animals alone with a non-Jew, then he will have relations with it, potentially. Now, this Mishnah says that if I buy an animal from a non-Jew, I can use it for a korban in the Beis HaMikdash, despite the fact that an animal that a human has had relations with a human being is nullified, unable to be used. It's damaged goods, can't be used as a sacrifice. So then why are we not concerned that when you buy any animal from a non-Jew, right? You go to the pet store, and you shouldn't be allowed to use any animal for a korban because you don't know what they did with the animal when you were not there. V'lo mishum muktzah, and it's also the you don't have to worry about the concern that the animal has been set aside in order to be brought as a sacrifice for Avodah Zara. V'lo mishum nevad, also you wouldn't presume that it is itself in Avodah Zara, and other people, and you brought other sacrifices to it.
Put a non-kosher animal on for the mizbech, that's a sacrifice.
No.
You mentioned about pet store. You have a lot of non-kosher.
Yeah, so I'm presuming your old-fashioned pet shop where they have the sheep, your goats, your right. That's exactly right. The Korban Depot. So Bishlama Muktzeh v'Nevad. So okay, so I understand why we're not worried about the fact that he set his animal aside for being a sacrifice for Avodah Zara. And I also understand why we would presume that the animal that he has here that we're buying from him is not being used for Avodah Zara. Why? Because im isa de aktiyeh, vim isa de palchei, because if the animal was a sacrifice or it was Avodah Zara, lo havim mizabim, he wouldn't be selling it. Right? It would be holy to him, and he wouldn't be selling it. He only sells the ones that he's not using for idolatry. So that's for sure. Now, rovea v'nirba lachush. But as far as if you're concerned that the animal that the non-Jew has relations with the animal, let's worry about that. We don't know what happened. So Amar Rav Tachlifa, Amar Rav Shila. So Rav Tachlifa says in the name of Rav Shila bar Avina, Mishmei de Rav, in the name of Rav, Oruved kochavim chas al behemto shalot ta'akir. We explained in the past that there's a potential for injuring your animal and making it so that it can't reproduce by having relations with it. And so therefore, a non-Jew would not do so with his own animal, because then it lowers the value of the animal. So if it was his own animal, he wouldn't do that. Now, if you're storing your animal with him, that he doesn't care about. So therefore, that's where you have to worry about it. So the two are not. We have this is basically a new kimta is what we call this, where we have the Tosefta and the Mishnah are not contradictory because they're talking about two different circumstances. The Mishnah is talking about a Jewish person's animal staying with a non-Jew, and the Tosefta is talking about a non-Jew's own animal. He's not going to do that to his own animal. Okay, hatinach nekevos. Okay, I understand why it would be a problem. Why it's not a problem for female animals, right? I understand that the non-Jew is not going to have relations with his female animals. Zecharim ma'ikalameim. But what about the male animals? We don't know if the male animals had relations with a non-Jewish lady, right? In that circumstance, that's not going to damage the animal, and therefore, why shouldn't we presume that that's a problem and we would be able to buy the animals for sacrifices? So Amar Rav Kahana, so Rav Kahana says, Hoel umakhishin bebasar. So he says the answer to that is because this is we're worried about a person having relations with his male animal, right? If he has relations with his female animal, so then it's going to make it so it cannot give birth. But a male animal, it's not going to damage. It's not talking about the situation where the male is having relations with the female yet. That's later on. This is where where a male non-Jew is having relations with his male animal. That we don't worry about because it's makhishin babasar. It also causes damage to the animal as well. And so therefore, anytime there's a physical damage to the animal, we're not worried the non-Jew is going to do anything like that. Elohadetanya. But now, how are we going to explain the contradiction with this brisa based on what Rav said, right? So let's take a look at this. Lokhin behema meroesh shelahen. So we're allowed to purchase an animal from their shepherds, right? For a korban. Now, why are we not lechush dilma rav'ah law? So why should we not be worried, right, that he's had relations with the animal? Because it's not his. When he's a professional shepherd, I guess he takes other people's animals. I'm sorry, I take that back. This is lokhin behema merosh lehan, right? You're allowed to purchase it. Lechush dilma rav Allah. Oh yeah, that's right. I said right. Mm-hmm. A shepherd takes care of other people's animals. That's what makes him a shepherd. Otherwise, he's an animal owner. So he takes care of other people's animals. Therefore, why are we allowed to purchase from him? After all, it seems like he would not restrain himself. So the answer is Rosh Lahen Misyare Mishum Hefsed Schar. The answer is the roa wouldn't do it. The shepherd wouldn't do it because he's worried that if he damages an animal under his care, then he loses his money, right? It's going to come out of his paycheck. So therefore, he's not going to do that either. Elohadetanya. But what about this brisa that says, Ein mosrin behema leroa shelahen? You're not allowed to give your animal over to a non-Jewish shepherd. Well, lema roa shelahen misyari mishum hefsed scharo. Didn't you just say the shepherd's not going to do anything? Because the shepherd's worried that he's going to lose his pay. So therefore, why should you worry about sending your animal over to the shepherd? He's not going to do anything with it. He's worried you'll catch him and lose his pay. So the answer is, In hu diyadi bahadadi mirsasi. Anan deloyad inan behu lo mirsasi. The answer is non-Jews are scared of other non-Jews, right? They know each other. They know what they do. And so therefore, he's worried another non-Jew might catch him doing the wrong thing. But he figures Jews, this is not the way they think. So I can get away with this if the guy who owns this animal is a Jew, and he will do it. As Amar Rabba, as Rabba said, Hainu Damrinchi, that's what people say, Michtava Galala Baza, Ragla Bechavrei Yoda. He says that the carving tool is scared of the marble, right? The carving tool is scared of marble.
How does that make sense?
What?
How can a carving tool be scared of marble?
Well, because carving tool makes lines and scrapes up marble. It's not literally scared, right? It's marble, right? Right. But it's saying that is the saying that people say, right? The carving tool, the marble knows that the carving tool is going to be able to make scrapes in it, in the same way that Raglo Bechavrei Yoda, a gossiper, is aware of other gossipers. How so? Because he knows what he would do. Right? Sort of as we say, that takes one to know one, right? If you yourself are harming people through gossip, then you know that somebody else also tends to gossip. You will be very nervous about the damage that this person could do, because you look at the word and go, I don't trust this guy. Look what he could look. Here's what I would do in this situation, right?
Backfire, basically.
Right. So therefore, So what would happen is, so we would say that the marble is scared of is scared of the tool that makes the carving. Okay. Ihachi, if that's true, zechar min nekevos lo nizbun. Okay, so now comes the next part. Fine. How about dechashin and dilma miravole? We should worry about buying a male animal from a female owner, because there's no reason why that would damage the animal, and we should worry that there's a relationship going on there. So the answer is Kavan demigraba mirsasa. The answer is because what happens is, once the animal's had relations with the lady, then the animal follows her around. And so because of that, she does not want that to be the case, because people are going to go, that's weird that the animal is so affectionate towards her, and so therefore she will be worried about that, and she will not do that. So therefore we're not worried about that happening either. Okay, so as long as we've got reasons why none of these things are going to happen. Again, if it's going to be a Jew's animal, and she's not going to be having this animal, so it wouldn't stop her. But if it's her own animal, then she wouldn't. Okay, Ella de Tani Rav Yosef. So what about this that Rav Yosef says? Armalta lo tarbi kalba, a widow should not raise dogs. Velo tishrei bar beirav beushpiza. She also shouldn't have young yeshiva students in her house as guests. So, what? So bishlama bar beirav tzaniya. Okay, so I understand why shouldn't have young yeshiva students. It's not a tznius thing. It's not appropriate. You spend a lot of time together. Eventually something inappropriate could develop.
Is she married? Does she have a husband home with her?
She's a widow. So her husband is not at home with her. So now, Ella kalba, but what about a dog? Keva demigra ba mirsasa. We shouldn't be worried about any relationship there, because we just said that she's not going to do anything, because then the dog will follow around, kind of weird. And so then she'd be worried about it. So we shouldn't have any worry about that being an issue. So the answer is Kevan dechishad yalei umtsa umasrich abasrei. So the answer is no. With dogs, you can throw it a piece of meat, right? And the dog's going to go running after the piece of meat. Meimar amri inchi hai demisrich abasra mishum umtsa dekamasrich. The answer is, people will presume, you know why the dog hangs around with her? Because she feeds him. Right? So therefore, that's why the dog likes her so much. So she has plausible deniability, and that would create a circumstance where she should avoid. Right? Okay. So now, we've gone through just about all the possibilities: male to male animals. We had male to female animals. We had male animals, females. What about nekevos etzel nekevos? Female animals, female people. My taima lo miachdinon. So he says, well, why is that a problem? So the answer is, Amar Mar Ukva Bar Chama said, Mipnei sha'ovdei kochavim mitzuyan etzel neshei chavrein. Because, the non-Jews, they hang around with each other's wives. Okay, that's, they're not so careful with these things. So they hang around with each other's wives. And upamim she'eino motzah. So one time he's going to come over. She won't be home. Okay? Umotzi asa behema, and he's going to see, hey, Mrs. Whatever her name is, Mrs. Smith's not home, but her animal is. So therefore, Verov, and that'll be the circumstance there. He's going to take advantage of the situation. Vibo is Ema, or else if you wanted to say, Afilamotz anami rov, even if she's home, he might pick the animal, right? Right? Damar mar chaviva alehem behemton shel Yisrael, yoser minisho sehan, because Mar said that they're so, honored by the fact that the Jews will leave their animals with them, they'd rather have a relationship with the Jewish person's animal than with another person's wife, I guess. Just leave that there. Damar Rabbi Yochanan, and Rabbi Yochanan says, B'shah sheba nachash el Chava. You know where all this comes from? This all comes from the snake and Chava. Because when the snake told Chava to eat from the tree,
forbidden tree,
right? So the Gemara is saying, it also enticed her for relations. Okay, so this is what happened. So hitil bas zuhama, and that created this a lapse in morality, and that's where the problem comes from. Ihachi, if that's true, Yisrael nami. What about the Jews? Jews also should be worried. We should worry about this. The answer is Yisrael shamdu Har Sinai paska zuhamason. The Jews, once they got to Har Sinai, that was the end of it, right? That was the end. Ovdei kochavim, but the non-Jews, shalom to Har Sinai, they never got to Har Sinai, lo paska zuhamason. Their immorality never ended. They still have all of the challenges of immorality from Chava's time that continued on. Okay. Now, I know what you're thinking. Iboilu, the question is, Ophos, what about birds?
Sure. Why not?
We knew that was coming, of course, right? What about birds? Toshma, come and listen. Damar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel, Mishum Rabbi Chanina, in the name of Rabbi Chanina, Ani Re'isi Ove Kochavim. I saw a non-Jew once, Shalakach Avaz Minashuk. He went and he bought himself a goose. Rava had relations with it. Chanka strangled it. Tzala roasted it. Ve'achla, and that was dinner.
me rest in peace.
Wow.
Yeah. V'amar Rabbi Yirmiyah Midifti, gross. That's how you say it, gross. V'amar Rabbi Yirmiyah Midifti, Rabbi Yirmiyah from Difti says, Ani ra'isi Aravi echad. I saw once an Arabian fellow, Shalakach Yerech Minashuk. He don't stop at animals, right? He bought a animal leg from the market. V'chakak b'kidei Raviyah. He carved into it a hole so he could have relations with it. Tzal'ah, then he roasted it v'achla, and he ate it. So you see, they got no limits, right? So there's...
Wow.
Chav Gimel and Aleph.
Good timing.
Yeah.
We'll come back.
Ravina Amar. Ravina says, nope, never it is. Ravina Amar lo kasha. So Ravina. So now we had said, right, that the Mishnah says that you're not allowed to send an animal over to a non-Jew because we are worried that the non-Jew could have relations with it. Okay. Then we said the Tosefta said you don't have to worry about it. And we just gave a whole explanation. It was his animal versus the Jew's animal. That was explanation number one. Ravina's got explanation number two. You know the difference? The way to explain how the Tosefta and the Mishnah don't contradict each other? He says, Lo kasha ha lichatchila ha diavad. The answer is, lichatchila in the first place. Meaning, if you've got a place to store your animal, don't pick a non-Jew. Don't pick a non-Jew. That's the best thing. B'diavad, if you bought an animal from a non-Jew, you can use it as a sacrifice, right? You don't presume that they've done it, right? Better don't present the circumstance to them. But then if you bought it, it's okay. That's how he's learning it. Okay. Where do you see such an idea that there's a difference, right? If you're worried about it, then stay worried about it consistently. Where do we get this idea that we're worried about it enough to ideally stay away from that, but after the fact, we don't presume anything bad happened? Ditznan, we learned in a Mishnah. Lotis yachid isha imahem. You shouldn't have a woman, shouldn't be alone with the non-Jews. Mipnei shechashudin al harayos. Because, this our Mishnah said, because they have immorality. And we don't want, they shouldn't be around there. Ura minhu, and we have contradiction to that. Ha'isha shenech b'shabidei ovdei kochavim. Let's say a lady gets captured by non-Jews. Al yedei mamon, if the purpose is ransom, right? They've kidnapped the lady and they send a ransom note, drop us $17 in unmarked bills.
Or we're gonna kill
Otherwise, right, you can get your wife back. And then the joke is, right? Starts off at $1 million. And then after like a month, okay, $500,000. Like, okay, 100,000. Yes. Anyway, yes. So anyway, al yedei mamon, if it's for money, muteris lebalo, then they're going to take care of her because they don't. Obviously, it's she's worth something, right? And they don't want to return damaged goods because then it reduces the ransom that you can request. So therefore, if it's for money, so then when she comes back, we presume that she was treated well, there weren't any problems, and she could return to being married to her husband. She hasn't committed adultery. We can assume that she hasn't committed any adultery there. Al yedei nefashos, however, if she was captured and sentenced to death, right? Let's say she was arrested for something. She's sentenced to death. Asur lebala, then she is prohibited to her husband because we presume that they took liberties. Now, if the halacha is that if a woman is assaulted, that doesn't invalidate her marriage, right? The issue here is that there is a concern that potentially she may have accepted it willingly, either as a result of the continued advances of the people who are her captives, right? Stockholm syndrome or whatever kind of circumstance like that. Or it's possible that she attempted to get herself free, right? And so she decided to use that as a bargaining tool in order to free herself. So with that we have to worry about, right? Because when it comes to financial, so now, how is it that on the one hand we said the non-Jews, we can't let the woman be alone with the non-Jew because we're presuming that something bad is going to happen. And then you said that if they're alone with the non-Jew, if it's for financial reasons, we don't have to worry about them doing the wrong thing.
But
Ella, yeah?
This is not the case for a hostage, for example.
It is a case for a hostage.
But that's not what happened, like now.
Like for now, yeah. So I don't think so.
Because they kept them because they're valued,
right?
But at the same time, they abuse them. So.
Correct. Yeah. So they seem to have kept them for trade value, right?
Yeah.
This is a case of mammon, I would presume.
Yeah.
Right. But shilohs get asked, I suppose, right? But it is for that reason we would presume that nothing happened. Ela lav shma mina. So rather, we can see clearly from here, shani lon bein lechatchila l'diavad. It makes a difference. Well, in the first place, right? In the first place, don't spend your time with the non-Jews. If you got captured, then you can presume everything is okay after the fact, right? It wasn't your choice. Then that's what we're saying. So that is Ravina's answer to the contradiction between the Mishnah and the Tosefta. Mimai, well, how do you see that? Because Dilma liolam emalach, maybe I always say to you, afil diavad namilo, that even after the fact, you have to presume that something happened as well. V'hacha hainu taima, the only reason why here it's not the case that you presume that something bad happened is demisyari mishum hefsid memono, the non-Jew, as we said, is worried he's going to lose money. So therefore, in general, we have to presume something bad did happen, but here we're presuming that nothing did, only because of the financial loss. So Teda, you can see that clearly because the Katani Seifa, the end continues on that al yidei nefashos asura labala, that if it was a captive and there was no financial gain, then she would be prohibited to her husband. V'tulo midi, so that is accurate. And we have nothing more to say on it, right? There's no difference between l'chatchila, b'diavad, that isn't an answer. So Ravina's answer was suggested, and it is refuted. Okay, next. Rav Padas Amar. Rav Padas gives answer number 3 to the distinction between the Mishnah and the Tosefta. He says, lo kash, it's not a contradiction. Ha Rabbi Eliezer, ha Rabbanan. We said, remember, that we said there are different ways that you can solve an argument between a Mishnah and another Mishnah and a Brisa. Number 1 is an ukimta, which we did first, right? It's 2 different cases. That's why they're 2 different things. This is giving the other answer, which is 2 different opinions. One is Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. The other is the Rabbanan's opinion. Ditnan. We learned in a Mishnah. Gabe paras chatos, right? Talking about a paraduma. Talking about a paraduma. The rule is Rabbi Eliezer says, Eina nikris min ha'ovdei kochavim. You cannot buy an animal for a paraduma from a non-Jew. You have to be worried that there was some problem that occurred. Now, with paraduma, you have more problems to worry about than other sacrifices, just to point out, right? Obviously, if it has any sort of blemish that invalidates the sacrifice we're going to see later on, then those also become invalidators for a paraduma. But additionally, it cannot have any burden placed upon it, right? It cannot have, as the Gemara says, lo Allah aleha ol. It cannot have a yoke placed upon it. So it can never do any work, put anything on top of it. So there are additional restrictions. You have to worry about that. So if you go to a non-Jew and you buy the animal, well, how do you know what the animal's done, right? So the Chachamim matirin, but the Chachamim say that it's okay. You can buy it from the non-Jew. Okay, so now, my lav behakmiflagi. Let's say the argument is based on this distinction between the Mishnah and the Brisa. De Rabbi Eliezer Sava, Rabbi Eliezer holds chayshinan l'revia, that we have to be worried that the non-Jew could have had relations with the animal. And therefore, as our Mishnah said, we have to worry about such things. And therefore, you cannot buy the paraduma from a non-Jew, because who knows what he's done. The Rabbanan Savri, yeah.
I'm not understanding something. Here I understand the concept with the paraduma.
Yes.
Because it loses the value for the mitzvah.
Yes.
But in the woman's case, I mean, no matter what, it's a life that you have to redeem. So what's the devaluation of
the issue is
her?
Well, I guess it's from the non-Jew's perspective, right? From the non-Jew's perspective, they're going to look. I guess that they're thinking, how much money is this husband going to pay to get his wife back? If they know that even if this husband does save her life, that he's never going to be able to stay married with her, right? Sure. So then he's not going to be the one who is raising the money to save her, right? It always is better to have somebody personally involved to be able to do the rescue, right? So
it's on the Gentiles' perspective.
I think so, yeah, because you're right. The Jews. The answer is, regardless, we'd have a mitzvah of pidyon shvuyim, and we'd have to redeem her in any event, right?
I mean, not for the paraduma, because
not for the paraduma.
Yeah, but for the wife, it would make sense that no matter what, they would pay for it.
Yeah, it would seem so.
Yeah.
But I suppose the non-Jews are thinking, right, okay, that there's some financial loss, right? Okay, so now, the Rabbanan Savri, the Rabbanan are holding lo chayshin in the Revia. We don't worry about it. That's why we can buy sacrifices from non-Jews, according to the Tosefta, and also you can buy an animal for the paraduma, because we're not worried about it. So, mimai. Well, what makes you think that that's the point of argument between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim? Dilma de kuliyama lo chayshin l'Revia. Maybe nobody thinks that non-Jews are going to have relations with their animals. And it's all according to the Tosefta. The hacha hainu taima, but it's different by the paraduma, because Rabbi Eliezer kiderav Yehuda, because Rabbi Eliezer, who says you can't buy it, he holds a different issue that Rabbi Yehuda brings up. Amarav in the name of Rav. Dam Rabbi Yehuda Amarav, that Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rav, Hiniach alehen oda shel sakin pasla. If he placed upon the paraduma a oda shel sakin,
bundle of sacks.
A bundle of sacks, meaning a sack of sacks, right?
Yeah.
So he's carrying this around. If once you put anything on this cow to carry around, pasla. So then that's going to invalidate the paraduma. It has nothing to do, in other words, the point they're making is it has nothing to do with whether you hold that the non-Jew had relations. We said there was another way to invalidate a red cow also, and that was for it to do work. So maybe the non-Jew did work with it. Maybe that's the issue, right? Ube egla, and when it comes to an egla arufa, so the egla arufa is the calf that you break the neck when you find a body that's dead between two cities and you don't know who it is. So that you have to be able to take an animal that has not done any work as well. But there the pasuk says that it has not pulled with the yoke, and therefore that is anshetim shochba. The animal has to have a burden on it and walk. Right? For a paraduma, the animal could be standing still. You put a burden on it, the animal is invalidated. When it comes to the animal for the egla arufa, right? Then the animal, we have to put the burden on it. That's not enough. The animal's still fine. You put a burden on it, then it takes a step. Now it becomes invalidated. That's the difference. Now, mar savar chayshinon or mar savar lo chayshinon. So that's the argument between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim. Rabbi Eliezer says you have to be worried that the non-Jew put a yoke on this animal, and the Chachamim say no, you don't. So lo salka daitach. So don't think that. That's not the issue. Because mishum nicha porta lo mafsid tuva. A non-Jew knows the value of a red cow. He knows how much that's worth to the Jews. There's no way that this non-Jew would ever take such a risk to lose a significant amount of money, minimal benefit of having it carry a few items around the farm, right? It won't do it. They won't do it, right? I get this minimal benefit and I lose this incredible volume of money. They won't do it. So therefore, it doesn't make sense that Rabbi Eliezer or the Chachamim would ever suspect that a non-Jew would do that to his red cow. Therefore, it must be the issue of having relations with the animal. Well, the Gemara says, "Hachinami lema mishum hana porta lo mafsid tuva." Well, then why would you presume the non-Jew's going to have relations with the animal if he knows that invalidates it too? So a little bit of pleasure and it ruins the animal so he wouldn't do that either. So the answer is Hosam Yitzro Tokfo. There, he's out of control, right? This Yetzer Hara takes over and it pushes him to do the wrong thing, and so therefore that he doesn't have control over. One is a pure financial decision. It makes no sense that somebody would gamble, here's a $2 gamble for $1 million loss. But when it comes to Yetzer Haras, then everything is different. V'dilma dekuliyama lo chayshin l'ravia. Okay, so we're back to the answer that this is the argument between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim about whether or not you are worried about non-Jews having relations with their animals. Let's say that nobody agrees. Kuliyama lo chayshin l'ravia. Nobody agrees that you have to worry about non-Jews having relations with their animal. V'hacha hainu taima de Rabbi Eliezer. And here's why Rabbi Eliezer says the animal's no good. Kidek tani. Sheila. It's like Sheila said. Titani Sheila taught the following. My time at Rabbi Eliezer, you know what Rabbi Eliezer's reason why you cannot buy a paraduma from a non-Jew? Because the pasuk says, Daber el bnei Yisrael v'yikchu elecha. You should speak to the Jewish people and say that you should take for you. Now, bnei Yisrael, yakichu. Yikachu? What is it? What was that? Yakichu. Ve'enov de kochavim yakichu. So this is, we have a yesh aim le mikra, right? A word, the words are not vowelized in the Torah. And so therefore this word can be read with two different vowelizations. One is v'yiklu, that you're commanding the Jewish people to buy a paraduma. And then the other way of reading it is that it is a reflexive. Not reflexive. It is can't remember, it's causative, there's a word for it, that you cause somebody else to buy. Meaning, vikhu means you should buy, yikachu means you should cause him to buy. You should cause them to buy. How do you cause somebody else to buy? You sell, right?
Convincing?
Just selling, right? Offering it for sale. Yikachu means that you should sell it, right? So that's what it means. So that means that according to Sheila, he's saying that a mitzvah of a paraduma has to come from a sale from a Jew to a Jew. There can't be a non-Jew involved. It has nothing to do with what the non-Jew has done with the animal before or whatever. We're not worried about that at all. Nobody thinks that the non-Jew is having relations with the animals. Nobody thinks the non-Jew is going to put any burdens on it. It's just the fact that it can't be a paraduma if it's being bought by a non-Jew. Lo salka daitach. So no, don't think that that's the answer. Dikatani seifa, because then the end says, V'chein haya Rabbi Eliezer posel bechor karbonos kulon, that Rabbi Eliezer would also invalidate you from buying any sacrifice from a non-Jew. Now, V'isaka daitach kidtani Sheila. Now, if you're going to tell me the reason why he's not allowing you to buy animals from the non-Jews is because what Sheila said, so bishlam apara ksiv bekicha. That's fine. The paraduma says it has to be purchased from a Jew, right? Elakulu korbanos kicha ksiv behu. But all the rest of the sacrifices don't have to be purchased from a Jew. You could buy any other sacrifice from a non-Jew.
Only it's our paraduma different.
The pasuk. The pasuk says so, right? That's what makes it different. So therefore, it has a different rule, and therefore, if Rabbi Eliezer is prohibiting you from buying any sacrifice from a non-Jew, it cannot be because of that. The Dilma, well, maybe ad kan lo pligi rabbanon ale de Rabbi Eliezer. Maybe the rabbanon don't argue with Rabbi Eliezer on Techav Gimel and Beis. Ela bepara de dameha yikarim, right? That maybe the reason why there's an argument between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim is because the paraduma is worth so much money that the non-Jew won't have relations with it and potentially ruin it, right? But aval bishar korbanos, but with other sacrifices, module, they might agree, right? You can't purchase from the non-Jew because you'd have to be worried that he might have relations. And then that would mean that the Rabbanan are agreeing with the Mishnah and would not resolve. The problem is that would not resolve the Tosefta. El Haditanya, how are you going to resolve the Tosefta then? Because according to this, the Chachamim are saying, both Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim are saying that you have to presume the non-Jews having relations with animals as long as there's not a great financial loss. How do you explain that we have the brisa that says, Lochen mehen behema lekorban, you can buy a korban from them, right? Now, Mani, who's that opinion? Who's going to say you can? If you're going to tell me that you are indeed worried that a non-Jew is having relations with the animals, who, according to Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim, then who's letting you buy the animals? Lo Rabbi Eliezer, lo Rabbanan, it's not going to be the Rabbi Eliezer or the Rabbanan. And furthermore, Ve'od, Tanya Behedja, it's clearly written out. Mayo sivu le chavrohi le Eliezer. So what is it that they asked? The other Tanaim asked Rabbi Eliezer. It says Kol tzon kedar yikav tzulach ya'alu al mizbechi, that all of the flocks of sheep in Kedar, which was a flock of very fattened sheep in a region that was owned by non-Jews. And the prophecy, the nevuah here from Yeshaya is that the Jews will eventually own all of those sheep, and eventually they're going to be able to use them as sacrifices. Well, if they belong to non-Jews, right? So then how could you you'd have to presume that the Jews they were having relations with the animal. How could you use them as sacrifices? The answer is that's the question that they asked. The Chachamim agree that you don't have to worry about that with non-Jews. It's only Rabbi Eliezer who holds that way.
Mitrim, I think they're non-Jews, right?
They were, but not all non-Jews are the same. We said that it was based on circumstance, right? That there was some
sheep from the Egyptians and used it for the doorpost.
Yes, but that's not a sacrifice. Wouldn't be the same, right? The blood. Korban Pesach, maybe it is a sacrifice. Yeah, but we wouldn't necessarily, maybe the Egyptians did not have that in their culture, which would make sense because they were worshiping it, so it sort of makes some sense. Okay, so now, Ad Kan, we brought this argument to Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim, whether you can buy a paraduma from a non-Jew. That's this argument, okay? And now, we decided to explain it as that we have to worry about whether non-Jews have relations with the animals or not, and that's the subject of their argument. So ad kan lo pligi ela b'chashasha, aval hecha devade rava pasla. Right now, that is only the issue is that you don't have any knowledge or information about what's happened to the animal, and the argument is what can you presume happened. But if you know for sure that the animal had relations with a person, so then for sure it's possible. Can't be a paraduma. That for sure is true. Shmamina, how do you know? So why do you presume that? You can see from here, depara kachim is beachi. We have an argument in other places whether the paraduma is considered a sacrifice or whether it's considered to be something which is for the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash, because it's not itself brought as a korban on the Mizbeach. It's used in order to purify people so that they can then be pure and go to the Mizbeach. So is the paraduma is the holiness of a paraduma equivalent to a donation of stone for building a wall, or is it equivalent to a donation of another animal that's used for a sacrifice? So you can see from the fact that having relations with the animal invalidates it is that it's equivalent to a sacrifice, because that's an invalidation of a sacrifice. Because if it only had the sanctity of any other item donated for the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash, mi mifsala ba revia, the fact that somebody's had relations with the animal, why would that nullify it, right? If you sold an animal that had relations to the Beis Hamikdash and said, here, this, then what did the Beis Hamikdash do? They turn around and they'd sell it again and they take the money and use it for upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash. They're allowed to do that. So the answer is no, it doesn't necessarily prove. Because Shani Para, Dechatas Karye Rachmana. The Paraduma is a unique thing. It's not clear exactly how to classify it. But what we do know is that the Torah calls it a Korban Chatos. It doesn't call it Korban. Calls it a Chatos. And therefore, since the Torah tells us, even if it is for the upkeep of the Beis Hamikdash, and it doesn't have the sanctity of the body that other Korbanos have, which would make it unable to be redeemed, for example, unless it has a mum, it nevertheless has some elements of a korban to it, which is that if it has a blemish on it, it wouldn't be able to be brought as a paraduma. Elameata, Okay. Well, if that is the case, so tiposel biyotze dofen. Then you know what else should invalidate a paraduma? If it is a C-section. If the cow was born C-section. Because that is an invalidation by a korban.
Was the calf premature or something? That's why I had to go for C-section or something?
Well, no, or complications in childbirth, right? If you have complications in childbirth, so the farmer cuts open the stomach of the cow in order to be able to rescue the calf, right? So that is going to invalidate because the pasuk about korbanos says, let's see where it's quoted here. It says the word yolda in it, right? It has to be born. Yotze dofen. He doesn't quote the pasuk here. Yotze dofen yud. Bechoros kabe korbanos vayikra. Shor o kasev o ez ki yivaled. Right, an ox or a sheep or a goat when it gives birth. So ki yivaled means it has to be born in a normal way in order for it to be valid for a sacrifice. Now, if you're going to tell me that invalidations for a paraduma equate to the invalidations of a other korban, so a paraduma can't be a cesarean section either. Before you say, okay, you're right, that's a good point. Yeah, fine, that's fine. Alama Tanya, why does it say in a brisa, hekdisha biyotze dofen psula? That if that according to the Chachamim, yes, this is true, that if the animal came out C-section, it is puzzle. Rabbi Shimon machshir, but Rabbi Shimon said it's fine. So therefore, it sounds like okay, according to the Chachamim, you're right. The things are equivalent. But how are you going to explain Rabbi Shimon? Why would he say it's okay if you just said that any blemish is invalidated?
A C-section is not a natural birth, so why would it be?
That's correct.
For the korban?
V'chitema Rabbi Shimon l'tamei. Maybe the answer is because Rabbi Shimon is going according to his own reasoning. Da'amar, he holds yotze dofen vlad ma'al yehu. He holds that a C-section is considered a 100% valid childbirth. Maybe that's why.
How is it if they have to cut the animal open?
Well, he says that even nevertheless, it's still born. Not born natural, but it's born. Therefore, born is born. That's what Rabbi Shimon says. We're going to say that's not what he holds. But let's presume that that's what he says, and that's what he means. V'hamar Rabbi Yochanan. But didn't Rabbi Yochanan say, Mordechai Rabbi Shimon linyan kodshim she'eno kodosh? Rabbi Shimon said very clearly that as far as sacrifices are concerned, it says ki yivoled, they have to be more naturally. That C-section is not a natural childbirth. When Rabbi Shimon makes his statement that a C-section is considered a natural childbirth, he's talking about something completely different. We know that the Torah tells us, Isha kis hazriya, when a woman gets pregnant and she gives birth to a male, so then she's tameh for 7 days and then she's tahor for 33 days. When she gives birth for a female, she's tameh for 14 days and she's tahor for 66 days.
Wow, so
what if the child is not born? What if it's a C-section? So, according to the Chachamim, it's a C-section. Child's not born. Therefore, all the blood is tameh like regular nida. She just goes right back to. She doesn't have the impure days and the pure days of childbirth. Okay, Rabbi Shimon says not so. He that's where he says a cesarean section in those cases is the same thing, works the same way. That's what he says. Now, he doesn't intend to mean that all cesarean sections are the same thing as regular births, right? That's not to say that a korban could be brought from a cesarean section. That's only with regards to this purity and impurity of a woman who's giving birth. That's a different story. Okay, so therefore, everyone agrees. Rabbi Shimon agrees here, right? That a cesarean section shouldn't be is not allowed by korbanos. Ella shani para. So the difference is by a paraduma. Hoel umum poselba davar erva v'avodah zara nami poselba. He says because you know what's different. Why the paraduma? Why it's different, right? He says it's different because a paraduma, we know that a blemish, is going to invalidate it. Okay, that is true. So therefore, even though it could be that a C-section, whether a C-section is going to invalidate or not invalidate it, right? It's not our issue. But the issue is that if it has a blemish, it's invalidated. So therefore, if the animal has been used for immoral purposes or it's been worshipped as an idol, that is a blemish. It's not a physical blemish, it's a spiritual blemish, but that is a blemish. Dichsiv, because the pasuk says, ki mashchisam bahem mum, right? If you destroy in it a blemish. Vetana deber Rabbi Yishmael, and the yeshiva of Rabbi Yishmael, they taught a brisa, kol makom shnemer hashchasa, whenever the word hashchasa is used, right? It says that this hashchasa is a mum. Well, what is hashchasa? That creates a blemish. Eino ela davar erva v'avodah zara. It means that it's talking about immorality and it's talking about Avodah Zara. How do you see that? Because davar erva dichsiv, because there's a pasuk that says about immorality, ki shchis kol basar esdar kol al haaretz. This is by Noach. It says that they have perverted all of their ways upon the earth. And the word hishchis is the word that we say that they've destroyed the natural order of things. So therefore that refers to immorality. V'avodah zara dichsiv, and avodah zara, the pasuk says, pen tashchisun v'asisim lechem pesach, lest you go astray and destroy, and you create for yourself a idol. So that is an indication that avodah zara and arayos are hashchasa, are destruction, and destruction, hashchasa, is the equivalent of a mum, and that's why it will be invalid according to everybody. It's invalid according to everybody for a paraduma. Now, of the hapara nami ho mum poso ba davar erva avodas kochavim posliba. This also by a paraduma, since a mum, a blemish is considered a blemish, so too this is going to be a blemish as well. Okay, now, Gufa, let's go back over something that we said before. Tani Sheila. Sheila had said, my time at Rabbi Eliezer. What was the reason why Rabbi Eliezer said you couldn't buy a para aduma from a non-Jew? Dichsiv, because the pasuk says, Daberel b'nei Yisrael, v'ikchu b'nei Yisrael, yikachu, right? You need to be able to have a Jew sell it, right? That was Rabbi Eliezer's viewpoint, right? Unique viewpoint. He says that it has to be from a Jew to a Jew, cannot be from a non-Jew. Veina ovdei kochavim yikachu, right? Ella, so therefore, a non-Jew could not sell the paraduma to a Jew. Ella me'ata, well, if that's true, then look at another pasuk. Says Dabero b'nei Yisrael v'kluli truma. Right? They're collecting money for the upkeep of the base of Mishkan, to build the Mishkan, and it's to speak to the Bnei Yisrael, and let's get everybody to gather up presents in order to put the Mishkan together. And therefore, what are you going to say? Hachanami, de Bnei Yisrael yikachu ve'ena ovdei kochavim yikachu. Only Jews can donate, non-Jews can't donate? Is that what you're saying? V'chitei b'hachanami, before you say, yes, that's true, it's not. V'amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Rav Yehuda said the name of Shmuel, Shalu es Rabbi Eliezer, they asked Rabbi Eliezer, ad hechan kibud av va'em. How far does honoring your parents go? Amar lehem, he said to them, Tzuru ma'asa ovi kochav mechad, I'll show you. Here's a non-Jew. There's a non-Jew. How far he respected his parents. La'aviv ba'ashkelon, to his parents in Ashkelon. V'dama ben Nesima Shmuel, the famous Dama ben Nesima story, right? That I'm sure got quoted to everybody in order to make you feel guilty for that, not honoring your parents well enough. Pam achas, this is the story you tell all the kids that wake you up from your nap on Shabbos. Pam achas, one time.
That's not kibbutz, that's called chutzpah.
Now, you'll see. Pam achas, one time, right? That's how it's called.
One time.
Bikshu mimenu avonim le'ephod. They were looking for stones to put, they were trying to, I guess, upkeep of the ephod. They were looking for the stones, the precious stones, for the ephod. And they were searching, they were going to pay shishim ribo schar, 600,000 for that. Okay? Huge amount of money. Keeping in mind, 200 zuz is an annual salary. Shishim ribo, well, he says shishim ribo dinar, Rashi says. A dinar is, what is it, 25 zuz, right? So it's a huge amount, okay? That was it was out. Rav Kahana masli b'shmonim riba, right? He said it was 800,000. It was more. V'hayu maftechos munachos tachas mirashosov. Now, the key to the safe was under the head of Shel Aviv, right? The keys to the safe were under his father's pillow. V'lo tzaroni did not wake him up. Now, when I first heard the story, the question is, I'm sure his father woke up and said, "What? You wake me up?" No. Okay.
In a very deep sleep, like getting feeling moved.
Wasn't he upset after?
It was not. It was, I guess, wasn't his stone, right? Right. It was Dama ben Nesina's stone, right? The father wasn't going to get any money, right? Dama ben Nesina was going to get rich. So Dama ben Nesina doesn't wake up his father in order to make money. So therefore, proves you can buy the stuff from a non-Jew for the sake of the Beis Hamikdash. So therefore, how is Rabbi Eliezer learning by a paraduma it has to come from a Jew, when by donating to the Mishkan it doesn't have to come from a Jew, and then we've got the story of Dama ben Nesina and it doesn't come from a Jew. So Avnei Shoam, when it comes to those stones, that's the exception to the rule. Hifsik ha'inyan, the pasuk separates. If you read the pasuk, Rashi says, midelo ksiv, it's the second line, Rashi, last word, midelo ksiv ve'avnei shoam. It doesn't say and avnei shoam, ki ksiv bekula, best one says, that you should collect v'chesef, and silver, ve'nechoshes, and copper, u'sechilas, and the blue dye, ve'argaman, and purple dye, ve'oros. Then it says, avnei shoam. Doesn't say ve'avnei shoam. Vav connects it to everything else. All of these things you have to buy from a Jew. But Avnei Shoam, it's by itself. Also, you have to collect Avnei Shoam, but it doesn't have to be from a Jew. In order to tell you that it doesn't have to come from a Jew, right? Get them from wherever you get your precious. Find your local. I guess you can go to your non-Jewish local jeweler, right? No offense.
Like Aaron, for example.
No, he is your Jewish. He's pretty Jewish. Yes. Just so you know. V'ha avnei miluim ksiv, right? But what about the fact that it says ve'avnei miluim? Right, the Avnei Miluim were the shoulder stones that went along as well. And it puts a Vav back in to indicate that those, right, puts them back in. Dehadar Arvei, right, it puts them back in. Ve'od, and furthermore, Tani Seifa, the end of this statement says, L'shana Acheres, that the story continues, and it says the next year, what happened to Daman and Nesina, Noldolo Paraduma, he had as a reward, he had a paraduma born to him, Be'edro and his flock. Nichnesu Chachmei Yisrael etzlo, so the Chachmei Yisrael came to him to buy it. Amar Lem, he said to him, Yodei ani bachem she'im ani mevakish mikem kol mamon shebe'olam atem nosim li. I know what I've got, and I can ask any price. This is a name your price item. Whatever I ask, you're going to pay. Achshav ani mevakish mikem ela oso mamon shefsadri. All I want is a mere 800,000 dinar. just that. Right? right? Just because of the money shefsadati bishvil abba that I lost because of my father. So therefore, the question is, how are they buying the paraduma? According to Rabbi Eliezer, for sure they couldn't buy the paraduma from him. So how are you understanding this? So the answer is, Hasam al yedei tigre Yisrael zavon. There, they used a broker, right? They had the non-Jew sell it to a Jew, and then the Jew sold it as a paraduma, right? That you could do. The Rabbi Eliezer lo chayesh. So that was the solution. So therefore, that story of Dama ben Nesina doesn't prove necessarily anything.
But we see that we can buy a paraduma from a non-Jew. What makes this one different?
They used a broker. The broker was Jewish, right? You go to your local paraduma broker. He doesn't have a lot of work. It's like once every, he had 9 times in all the time since Moshe Rabbeinu, 9 paradumas. So therefore, it's not that often. But it's like the real estate agents for the luxury housing, right? They make fewer sales, but they're much larger price. So you just got to get like one, right? You need your one sale and you're set for life. Anyway, now. Rabbi Eliezer lo chayesh l'revia. Now, what you're suggesting is, you've come to the conclusion that the reason why Rabbi Eliezer does not allow you to buy the paraduma from a non-Jew is because the pasuk says so, having nothing to do with you suspecting him of having relations with the animal, right? He says that's not going to be an issue. So, V'atanya, we want to brisa, Amru lo Rabbi Eliezer, they told Rabbi Eliezer the following, Maisa v'lakchuha min ha'ove kochavim. There was a story, and they bought this paraduma from a non-Jew. V'dama Shimo, his name was Dama. V'amri la Remetz Shmo. Some say his name was Remetz. So Amar lehen Rabbi Eliezer. So Rabbi Eliezer heard the story, and he said to them, Misham Raya, that's not a proof. Yisrael hayu mishamrin osa misha shenolda. So he said that wasn't an issue because the animal was being watched from the time it was born. Well, what are you watching for? What are you worried about? So you must be doubly concerned. Number one, you can't buy it because it's coming from a non-Jew, right? That you solved by the broker. But then you also have to worry, maybe he had relations with the animal. Clearly, Rabbi Eliezer is worrying about that because he says they had a mashgiach, right? Solution, they had a mashgiach.
It was not me.
So the answer is, Rabbi Eliezer Tarti Isla. He holds of both of those issues. He holds of the issue was, Kicha, he says Isla Kicha. He says that it's a requirement to purchase Jew from a Jew. That's from that pasuk. V'chayish nami l'ravia. You also have to be concerned that a non-Jew had relations with it, and the Rabbanan don't worry about either of those things. But Rabbi Eliezer says you have to worry about both of those things, and therefore they needed a mashgiach in order to check all the way back, to make sure that the animal was fine. Amar Mar. So Mar said, Yisrael hayu mishamer no so mishash nolda. They had a mashgiach, watched the animal from when it was born. V'neichush dilma ravi le'ima. What if the animal's mother was involved in an illegal relationship? Ki hava me'abra, while it was pregnant. And we know that ubar yerech imo, the fetus is part of the mother. And so therefore the fetus would be contaminated by that relationship if the mother was pregnant. Dama Rava, as Rava says, vlag ha nogeches, aser he, if aser he vlada nagcho, vlada nagcho, period. He says that if you have an animal that's pregnant, okay, and it has a baby inside, and it gores and kills a person. So if there's Adim, so you kill the animal. If only one person sees it, the person admit, so then the animal becomes unusable as a korban. So now that the animal is unusable, not only is the animal unusable, but the fetus inside the animal is also unusable. So when you invalidate the mother, you invalidate the offspring inside as well. And similarly, Vlad had nirves, aser he uvlada. So same thing. If you've got a hanirvas, a knuckled blood, hanirvas. If the animal, the mother had relations, so then aser he, she's prohibited. Vlada, nirvu, right? Then also the offspring is also considered to be having had relations as well, and it is also invalidated. So Amos. So the answer to that is Yisrael hayu mishamer noso misha shenotzra. They were watching the animal all the way from conception. Somehow they knew this might be a paraduma, so they had Jews watching the animal all the way from conception. Okay, so now v'nechush. We'll do one last little bit. Try to get to a little dot that's further down. V'nechush dilma rav uha le'ima me'ikara. Maybe somebody had relations with the mother before it got pregnant, which might also invalidate it. D'Tanan, we learn a Mishnah. Kol ha-poslin legabe mizbeach. Anything that is invalidated for a korban, v'ladosehem mutarin. Then they're offspring. If an animal has a mum, let's say, or an animal had relations, or whatever it is, so then the offspring of that animal can be kosher, right? That doesn't invalidate their offspring. V'tani alo Rabbi Eliezer oser, and on that Rabbi Eliezer says, not true, oser. So hanichal Rava damar Rava. So hanichal Rava. That's going to be fine according to Rava. Damar Rava versus Amar Rab Nachman. Machlokes keshenir be'u keshehed mukdashin. The argument is the animal was consecrated as a korban. Okay, then, right after it was consecrated, somebody had relations with that animal. Now it becomes an invalidated animal. Then the animal becomes pregnant. You've got an invalidated animal growing a baby inside. So then it basically says now that's just an invalidated animal with another invalidated animal inside. Aval, and everybody, and that's their argument. Does the fact that the mother is invalidated now create the invalidation that gets passed on to the offspring? Aval kishein chulin, but let's say the animal was not a korban yet. So then divrei akol mutarin. Then if the non-Jew has relations with it, then the animal's not invalid. The animal itself is invalidated, but it isn't a kodesh animal that became invalidated. Therefore, it was chulin. It became invalidated. Then somebody designated it as kodesh. Okay, fine, but it's not a kodesh animal that had relations. So therefore, if it becomes pregnant after the fact, everyone feels those offspring are fine. Ela Rav Huna bar Chinina, but according to Rav Huna bar Chinina, he says, Amarav, Nachman machlokes keshenirvu keshein chulin. He argues and he says, even if the mother was invalidated when it was still not pregnant, not hektish, before any of this happened, it has relations, that becomes invalid. Then you make it hektish, then it becomes pregnant, even then it's no good. And everybody agrees that once it's hektish, it's going to be invalidated. So Ma'ikal Meimar, how are you going to explain this? That once the animal, even if the mother who was a paraduma, the mother of the paraduma had relations, it's going to invalidate the paraduma as well. So the answer is, Ema, we've got to say, Yisrael hayu mishamer nosa le'ima misha shenotra. They were guarding the mother from the time the mother was born. So they guarded the mother from the time the mother was born. Then they had the offspring right, guarded the offspring from whom it was born. Okay, v'nechush dilma ravua le'imo de'imo. Maybe you got to worry about the mother of the mother, right? So the answer is kuli hai lo chashin. That far back we don't have to worry about, right? That far back. You only have to worry about the mother of the paraduma might be a problem. So therefore, yeah, they watched. Now that means they must have had some suspicion that they're going to, because they're not watching all of the cows in the world. Maybe it's going to have a paraduma.
Yeah.
So it must have been a red cow already, the mother one. So, but yeah, so all right,
Wow. Go
place to stop.